My name is Dustin Wheeler. My family calls me Duck Duck, and my love of wine created the Duck Vine. The joy and passion I have is a bottle of knowledge I want to share with you. Let me be your favorite sommelier and pour you a big glass of edutainment so you can sit back, swirl it, sniff it, and sip it as we ducks fly together through the wine world. Let's duck and go. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the newest episode of the Duck Vine podcast. I want to talk for a second before we jump into our topic for the evening. Just want to have everybody's eyes on the horizon for some fun projects that may be coming up soon. But I also want to take a moment to thank all you guys for your continued support. And just want to let you know it's being heard loud and proud around the industry. And we have some fun things lined up from opportunities that have come because of the podcast, and that's from you guys sharing and downloading and talking to your friends about it and whatever you may have done to help grow this wonderful community. You know, us ducks got to fly together, so I appreciate you all, and I just wanted to start out by saying that. Now we're going to have a fun topic this evening. We've been journeying through Italy and its regions, but I wanted to take a pause here. I know much earlier in the podcast history, I did talk about, I think it was like the third episode in or so, one of my favorite grapes in Nebbiolo, which we all know comes out of the Piedmont now, and how impactful it was to that area. So as we've been going through Italy, it kind of dawned on me that while we're talking about these regions and kind of blasting through them, I haven't talked about as much on the grapes as maybe we did in France, because I think in Italy, as we're trying to cover all these regions, the regions are big players in it, and some of the grapes do come out, and we've mentioned them here and there, but I think there's one grape that is indigenous to Italy that makes a huge impact, not only in Tuscany, as we talked about last podcast, but in a big portion of Italy. And so we're going to talk about Sangiovese and some of the Sangiovese clones and just the role that they play, not only in Italian winemaking, but winemaking around the world. So we'll kind of jump back and forth between Sangiovese and Brunello. And they do get often treated separately, but I want to state up front, just so it's clear, Brunello is Sangiovese. Brunello is a clone of Sangiovese. Its name literally translates into little brown one, but it is a direct clone from Sangiovese. So hand in hand, they are kind of the same grape, but their regulations and terroir have made them different staples in the wine world. So that's kind of one of the first things I want to talk about. Is sometimes when people talk about Sangiovese is a big umbrella, they'll say Sangiovese, maybe you could consider it like the Pinot Noir of Italy. And I'm on the fence on whether I agree or disagree with that statement. I see it both ways. It is not a Pinot Noir, but if you talk about a grape that maybe is a little more in the medium body range like a Pinot Noir would be, I could see that. Where I really see it is how good these two grapes are at showing their regions, their terroir, everything that happens around it. You really get a sense of place when you're drinking Sangio or Brunello. And that's part of the reason why Brunellos have become so infamous and so expensive. It's just their expression of their place. They show a sense of place so well. So it's some fun grapes that we're going to jump into. So kind of buckle in, and here we go. So Sangiovese, Italian red. It is indigenous to Italy. They believe the Etruscans were the first to kind of cultivate it out of its wild Vitis vinifera form. So its name is translates to the blood of Jupiter. Literally translates to blood of Jove, I believe is how you would pronounce that. And it covers a vast portion of Italy's landmass. So we go all the way from Romagna down to Lazio. So it is the most widespread grape in Tuscany, Campania, and Sicily. When we think about how people see Sangiovese outside of Italy, like, you know, in the New World, I think most people think of Chianti, Rosso di Montalcino, Brunello di Montalcino, maybe Vino Nobile di Montepulciano would kind of be the standouts of where people know Sangiovese from. And of course, it is also a big player in Super Tuscan wines. If you remember from our last episode, just because we have a Super Tuscan doesn't mean it has to have Sangiovese in it. But some of your most famous Super Tuscans, like Tignanello, does have a big play with Sangiovese in it. Sangiovese was very well known by the 16th century. And its ancestor or parentage are from two grapes, Ciliegio and Calabrese Montenuevo. The former is an ancient variety from Tuscany, and the latter is a Calabrian native grape. That's like the toe of Italy, but sadly, that grape is actually like on the verge of extinction. At least 14 different Sangiovese clones exist, which of course Brunello, as we talked about already, is the most famous out of all of those. An attempt to classify the clones into Sangiovese Grosso, including Brunello and Sangiovese Piccolo families, has gained little evidential support. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Young Sangiovese has this fresh, fruity flavor. It's like strawberry, a little bit of spice, but it does really well at taking on oak. When you're blind tasting some of these grapes, it can oftentimes, depending on how it was aged, really go this whole gambit, and even can show signs that put it not identical to Nebbiolo, but would definitely make you like question it. Nebbiolo has a very unique color, so that's like a great tell. But with the oak aging and the oak that Nebbiolo also goes through, it can be two grape varietals that can become very similar. So Sangiovese is a really unique wine. It makes like medium plus tannins and usually pretty high acidity as well. So early theories on the origin of Sangiovese date to Roman winemaking times. According to legend, the name was coined by the monks of the communes of Santa Carnelago de Romana in the province of Rimini in Emilia Romagna, which is a region we've talked about on the east central side of Italy. First documented mentions of Sangiovese comes around in about 1590 from Gio Vanvitello Soderini. He called the grape Sangiovese, and noted that it makes very good wines, but if the winemaker was not careful, it could take the risk of turning the wine into vinegar. Most historians believe that this is the first historical mention of the grapes. It won't be until the 18th century that Sangiovese would gain widespread attention through Tuscany, being with Malvasia and Trebbiano makes it very unique history. 1738, Cosimo Trinci described wine made from Sangiovese as excellent when blended with other varietals, but maybe too hard and acidic when made by itself. It was also echoed in 1883, kind of the same process of that. So you can see just how high that acid is at multiple times. Has been noted throughout history as just being super acidic, or so high and acidic you could risk turning it to vinegar. That's a key component to making vinegars. You got to have that acidity there. That's why some people don't like it. Sangiovese would experience a period of popularity late 19th, early 20th century. 1970s Tuscan winemakers began a period of innovation by introducing oak treatments, and then started the Super Tuscan movement and starting blending Sangiovese with grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, I want to contrast this kind of history to Brunello's history. So, we talked about Sangiovese there in a whole, but I'm going to read some quotes here. And remember when I read them in Sangiovese 1590, 1738, 1883, people were tiptoeing on the line of it's great wine, but it's acidic. We jump over to kind of the history of Brunello. One of the first records of Brunello was a red wine that was made in Montalcino in the 14th century. In 1831, Marchese Cosimo Ridolfi praised the merits of red wines of Montalcino above all other Tuscans. So 1831, already getting praised super high. 1865, an agricultural fair in Montalcino noted the prize-winning wine of the event was a selected red wine known as Brunello. In the 19th century, there's a local farmer, Clemente Santi, who actually isolated certain plantings of Sangiovese vines in order to produce 100% of a varietal wine. And that became Brunello. 1888, his grandson, Ferruccio Biondi Santi, who was... Now, Biondi Santi was a soldier who fought under Giuseppe Garibaldi, who played a major factor in the unification of Italy. When he came back from the war, decided he really wanted to continue what his grandfather had done. Now, his grandfather had isolated the vines and made sure that when he was making wine, made 100% Brunello, because up until this point, it had gotten praise of Brunello was always known as making great wines, but they wanted to take it a step further. So, grandson taking grandfather's dream and ups it to the next level. They take those areas of the vineyard where it had just been isolated 100% Sangiovese clone, 100% Brunello as they knew it, and then they started to age it. And part of the reason that they did that was not only to see the wine, how it would grow and make these long-lasting wines, but themselves as wine lovers also wanted to drink higher quality wines. And so it wasn't that they went out to create something to just make money or anything like that. They did it because they loved wine so much that they wanted to make it better. So by the end of World War II, Brunello di Montalcino had developed a reputation of Italy's rarest wines. I think I saw a number now in modern day. I don't know what the numbers were during World War II, but in modern day Brunello production, something like 73,000 cases of Brunello is made a year. That's for the whole world. That's for Italy, the U.S., whole world. 73,000 cases. When you think about it, that's really not that much wine You look at 73,000 cases, 12 bottles in a case. They're coming out with less than 1 million bottles of wine, 876,000 bottles of Brunello wine made a year. It's a hard to find wine, and that's part of why if you go out and look for Brunellos, they get very expensive very quickly. So the only commercial producer recorded in government documents was the Biondi Santi firm. This is covering from when grandfather started to World War II. They'd actually only declared 4 vintages up until that point. Part of it was because of how they aged it, but they were still experimenting with it. So from 1888 to 1945, you had an 1888 release, 1891, 1925, and 1945. The high price and the prestige of these wines soon encouraged other producers to emulate Biondi Santi. By the 1960s, there were 11 producers making Brunello, and in 1968, the region got its DOC status. By 1970, the number of producers had more than doubled to 25. 1980, there's 53 producers, and then that's also when they got their DOCG recognition. By the turn of the 21st century, there are now nearly 200 producers of Brunellos, but mostly in small farmers and family estates. Part of that has to go into how Brunello is made with its restrictions. So I'm going to talk about that, and then we'll jump back into kind of Sangiovese world. So Brunello, like we talked about, made 100% Sangiovese. So if you're making a Brunello, it has to be 100% Brunello. So in turn, 100% Sangiovese. But they can't go to Chianti and grab Sangiovese. It has to be the Brunello clone. So traditionally, the wines go through an extended maceration period to try to get all that color and flavor extracted from the skin. Following fermentation, the wine is then aged in oak. Traditionally, the wines are aged 3 years or more in bottle. Large Slavonian oak cask, which will impart a little bit of flavor, but not as much as some of the smaller barriques. But there are some winemakers that will use the small French barriques to get more oak flavor, especially that vanilla. Now, when you look into getting Brunellos, you'll run into usually, like, if you go to find Biondi Santi, you'll see Biondi Santi and then Biondi Santi Reserva. The traditional bottles are released on the market 50 months after harvest, and then the Reserva is released 12 months after that, so 62 months. And I believe it is dictated that when it is set up, it is a requirement that the winemakers hold the wine for 4 years at their vineyards, and then it's released the next January after that. So you're not going to find a 2020 or 2021 yet. You might start to see some 2020s sneaking out, but 2021, 22, 23, you're not going to see for a while. And that's part of why we see such a price hike in Brunello wines, is these makers are literally having to sit on inventory for 4 years or more before they even get to see a profit come out of it. Makes it very interesting as far as talking about a business model. Now, there is, if you go into looking and look up Brunello regulations and winemaking laws, there was a period in 2003 and I think again in 2008 where some makers were actually had commercial fraud charges brought up against them because they were saying that the wine was not 100% Sangiovese. And so some of their wines got blocked from being exported. And it's a very serious matter in Italy, because winemakers who intentionally stray from the rules and regulations can receive jail time up to 6 years. So it's an interesting world when you talk about it, but also something that's taken very seriously in the wine industry for sure. So, jumping back to Sangiovese, I wanted to talk about kind of like clones and offsprings. So, early research into clones was started in 1906 by a guy by the name of Milan. Milan discovered that Italian grape known as Sangiovese was actually several different varieties, which he then classified as Sangiovese and Sangiovese Piccolo. The Sangiovese Grosso family included clones growing in Brunello region and Brunello Gentile and Sangiovese de Lamoli that was grown in Chianti. The Sangiovese Grosso produced the highest quality wines, while the Sangiovese Piccolo family, which includes more of the clones, produced what they would deem as a lesser quality. In the 20th century, research by the Italian government and Chianti Classico Consortio discovered that some of the best producing clones from wine quality perspective came from Emilia Romagna, which now there's all these different kind of clones going on. So they really refer to them as fun names like R24 and T19. As research has continued and over time, all the way up to modern day, from where this research had started 2008, there was more DNA typing done, and it showed Sangiovese had very close relation to about 11 other Italian grape varietals that is now confirmed to kind of be like definitely a connection, but where they think Sangiovese is the parent, and that's why Sangiovese is showing up. So it's interesting when we started this podcast how I talked about the impact that Sangiovese has on Italian wine, but also being a parent grape to 11 other Italian varietals. We talked about Cab Franc, and it's a parent of like 3 or 4, and very important grape varietals. But Sangiovese having its hand in 10 to 11 other varietals as well is really, really unique. So, talked about how Sangiovese is a good show of its earth, its surroundings, its terroir. It's adaptable to many different types of soils, but it really thrives in limestone. It produces very elegant wines, very big aromas. Chianti Classico region, Sangiovese thrives on shale clay soil known as Galestro. And in the Montalcino region with Brunello is a very high proportion of limestone Abruzese soils. The lesser known zones of the generic Chianti kind of region are more clay. So it's really interesting, like we talked about, how well this grape shows its terroir. And you have Chianti Classico, Brunello in these different regions. And this is why the DOCGs are so important, that you can see with the soil types connected to these regions having a very extensive connection to great wine production. As I've stated multiple times in the history of this podcast, though, just because you have a DOC or a DOCG wine doesn't mean you're getting a high quality producer, a high quality end product. But what it does tell you is, okay, if you like a Chianti Classico, then we know you like Sangiovese on Galestros soils. Versus if you like a Montalcino, then you like your limestone. So when you start to go shopping, to make sure you're spending your money the wisest to try to find something that you're going to connect with and enjoy, now you really can start to see why, like, oh, okay, just because Brunello is more expensive doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily enjoy it more if I like the expression of Chianti Classico, because the soils are different. And that's really what DOC and DOCG gives to us as consumers as guidelines. Again, it's not the quality, but it's these other methods. It's, if you're getting a Brunello, you know it's been aged. We talked earlier about Sangiovese can be a high acid wine, but you put it in oak or you age it and it calms down that acidity. And so there's another factor. So these DOCs and DOCGs are more than just stickers. It's a great tool for us to use, again, as consumers, to really make sure we're spending our money the wisest that we can. So Sangiovese requires a long growing season. It buds early. It's slow to ripen. And it needs sufficient warmth to be able to ripen. But if it gets too much warmth, it can start to become diluted. And especially with global warming happening, there are certain points in temperature where if it gets too hot, grapevines will actually shut down and stop. They will stop ripening. So it's also, we say we want it to be warm, but there's just kind of this great threshold where we want to sit. So it's not too cold, it's not too hot. It's like the Three Bears in porridge. As you start to hear these stories and put two together, you can see why it's just so difficult to create wines, and so much love has to go into it, and trying to combat Mother Nature in a scale that you literally have no control over. It's not like you can walk outside and be like, oh, it's too hot, let me turn the AC on these vines. It just doesn't work. So it's a labor of love, and this is why vintages become important. If it's too hot or too cold or whatever, really has a big influences. So harvests in Italy traditionally begin after September 29th. Typically, the modern harvest has been mid to late October. Longer growing seasons give the grapes time to develop more richness. But in cool vintages, this results in the grape being even more acidic and harsher than normal. For the best quality yields, need to be kept in check, as the vine is vigorous and prone to overproduction. So going out into the vineyards and trimming new buds and making sure that they aren't overproducing. When trimming was discovered, I think it was in the 1400s, a monk tied his horse to a vine, and then the horse started chewing some of the vines that were where he could reach. They came out and thought, oh, those vines are going to be destroyed. What do we do? But as we know in science, sometimes the best experiments or results are accidents. They found out the next year where that horse had ate, the vine came back and produced better fruit than any of the other vines, because it could be focused. It's just like us as humans. If we start to spread ourselves too thin, or all these different places, we just don't have enough energy to create 100% commitment in each one of these different areas. And we translate that into the vines, and we go out and trim, and really control where the vines are focusing its energy and its nutrients and its good stuff, and pushing that into to the grapes to give us really high quality wines. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think of. Hopefully, you can see where I'm trying to go with that and how I'm trying to like connect the dots there. So I want to talk about one other wine that kind of jumps into this connection with Sangiovese and Brunello, and that's Rosso di Montalcino. Rosso di Montalcino was established in 1984 as a way to give some of the Brunello producers flexibility to continue the tradition of long aging of the region's flagship wine. I mentioned earlier, you're sitting on a product for 4 years before you can make a profit. I mean, try to go like start a business right now and get any backer to be like, hey, give me your money, but you won't see anything for 4 years. Most people are going to be like, you're crazy, right? So Rosso is made from 100% Sangiovese, grown in the same region as Brunello di Montalcino. However, the wine is required to spend only 6 months aging in oak and 1 year in the winery total before release. So they don't have to do 6 months in wood and 1 year in the bottle. They just had to do 12 months. They could do all 12 months in oak if they wanted to. It's 9 months, whatever that maker wants to do. This allows Brunello producers to make an earlier releasing wine that can generate that cash flow like we've kind of talked about. In less than ideal vintage scenarios, some producers will take all of their grapes and make them into Rosso, because if you know it's not going to be a great quality vintage, and I talked about Biondisanti, who is the grandfather of Brunello, they only made 4 vintages. So crazy to think of. They only made 4 vintages from 1888 to 1945. So they would take the rest of their grapes and turn them into these Rossos, because they want to make sure that they are delivering on the expectations of the consumers of these high quality, sophisticated wines that they've come to know. Wineries can also declassify their Brunellos that has already been aging 2 to 3 years and release it then as a Rosso. They can't release it as a Brunello, but if they've been aging it for 2 or 3 years and it's just not producing what they're looking for to become this high-end Brunello, then they can downgrade it essentially and make it a Rosso. So you can get some Rossos that have a little bit longer age. But like we talked about, we're mainly looking for a fantastic expression of Sangiovese with Brunello grapes, but not having to wait for an extended period of time. That's what you get with Rosso. And I just want to touch on one last subject that I think is so unique and so different from what most of us would experience in the business world today. I talked about Biondisanti. I said just a minute ago that they're the grandfathers of Brunello. They're really the ones that started focusing on Brunello itself, aging it, creating high quality, high end, fantastic wines for themselves, kind of selfishly first. But what was not selfish about them is when they created this, they could have easily trademarked this product. They could have trademarked Brunello as we know it, Brunello di Montalcino. They could have put that as their own. But when asked about it, the grandson said, no, we were here to create high quality wines for everybody to enjoy. Our techniques and what we do are not ours. They're there for the wine world. And so instead of going on a money grab and saving it for just themselves, they welcomed and encouraged the wineries around them to try this style and showed them how it would pay off. And I just think that's a unique thing. I think it's so cool to see, and it happens multiple times in the wine industry, where we got to be able to make money to support our families, but wine is this sense of community. It's something that we enjoy with others, more so than just the selfishness of enjoying it by ourselves. A glass of wine, a bottle of wine is always better when shared with someone else. If you look at history, even in the Bible, the most important parts of history, the Bible, and stories that are told, how many of them happen around a dinner table or with a glass of wine around? Wine transcends just normal social lives. I think it's such a cool thing to be a part of. It's why you guys are listening right now. Wine has come to make impacts that have allowed people to enjoy each other's company, brought people together, shared many millions of stories, and will continue to do so. And I'm so thankful that wine is a part of my life. It's a part of your guys' life. I want to thank you all for being here to share in this journey with me and to share with the people around you and the friends that you have. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun making it. Hopefully you had fun. Maybe you learned something. But the most important part is we got to drink some wine. I'll see you guys soon. Hope you have a great night. Bye-bye.